name is Juan Mendez. I'm a full-time faculty member and a senior instructor in the School of Hospitality and Sports Business. I've been doing that for 7 years. This started my 8th year here. And in that role, I teach different hospitality courses, but also business for social good, which is another required course for our undergraduates. But in the hospitality program specifically, I've been focusing my teaching on events and event planning and what does that look like.
Now that the Democratic National Convention is in Chicago's rearview mirror, it's a good time to look back and take stock on how it went. Overall, how did Chicago do planning and hosting? And would you say the city tried anything unique or different?
Absolutely. It's a wonderful event. Great opportunity for the city of Chicago to be here, to have it, to host and have the world's eyes on our city for an entire week. Some things that were unique to the Democratic National Convention this year versus other years. Specifically, the Democratic National Committee, along with the Planning Committee through Chicago, wanted to highlight the diversity within our city, also minority-owned businesses. So this is the first Democratic National Convention that was run and operated and produced by a Black-owned event production company, which is something huge to be able to display not just what resources are available in the events industry broadly, but what Chicago specifically has to offer. So on the world stage for 4 days, they got to see what is able to be produced. And as many of our alums, industry individuals that have a connection to DePaul and the Driehaus College of Business will notice it was a very well executed event. Great timing, good use of technology and the connection. So one of the major things that happened that usually doesn't is the role of the vice president and the nominee was brought in throughout the convention rather than one specific day. So they needed to coordinate the live broadcast from Milwaukee to Chicago on Wednesday night. And that's something that took a lot of planning, a lot of execution to be able to have everything timed correctly. And that was something moving forward might be a great opportunity for other conventions to utilize technology. And what does that look like?
Looking at it as a whole from the hospitality perspective, how much of an impact did this year's convention have on the city's hospitality sector in your estimate?
Absolutely. So going into the convention, there's always an estimation. There's always a thought of how much is it going to be the impact. And in previous convention cycles, so we'll go back to 2016, which is the last live cycle that took place. There were estimations of $250 million impact, $300 million impact on the Republican National Committee side. And just to be aware that it's going to take months for them to figure out and calculate the actual impact using data and using criteria that we've used in the past. But those cycles came in way under those numbers. So the city and the Democratic National Committee have estimated between $150 and $200 million in economic impact. There were estimated to be 50,000 attendees. 15,000 of those are media individuals who attended, beyond the 5,000 convention delegates that were here. So the rest of it is party officials, different employees that work, but that impact's going to be huge. We have some numbers starting to come in. And in the hospitality industry, what do we look at to measure this? The easiest data to pull is hotel revenue data. And just to let the individuals know that it's over $300 per night on average during the Democratic National Convention. We also look at groups and the bookings for large groups at hotels, and that was over $350 per night. That's 25% and 50% above what we were bringing in last year. So net positive when we start looking at the data coming in that we have easy access to very quickly. So I am very positive looking forward at the overall economic impact of the convention. I think we're going to be close to, if not exceeding, a lot of these estimations, because once we start looking at, you bring in 50,000 individuals, they're not just staying in hotel rooms. They're going to restaurants, they're having other activities. There were multiple party and individual events that were happening throughout the week. So all of that is added in. Many individuals also stayed on to continue their stays which adds an even larger impact for us. So all of that economic information is great. More broadly, why do cities want to host events like the DNC? It's the marketing element of it. The highlighting, the showcasing of a city for an entire week when everyone's eyes are on it sells the city to bring in individuals and groups outside of the Democratic National Convention. So we're looking at long-term, how do we sell the city? What does that look like? Groups are going to see this amazing production, we had amazing weather, which was great and fortunate for the city at that time period. But moving forward, looking a couple of years down the road, we're going to start seeing large groups coming in that will increase the impact of this event.
What are some of the key lessons that you feel the city and the Democratic National Convention itself might have learned from this year's event that can be used to improve the 2028 National Convention?
Yeah, I think one of the best things that the city did, and any future site can take away from, is the well-executed production of the event itself. Aside from night one, there's been some criticism about the length of the night one convention, right? I chalk that up to there was a major shift in the plan a month prior to the convention happening, and they need to make adjustments in order to involve everyone who needed to be. So they did as good of a job, but a great event planner and a great event producer sees something happens and then addresses it immediately. So you saw night 2, night 3, night 4 go much smoother, nearly on time. They made adjustments on the floor, so they were able to do that. So moving forward, other cities should be doing that. I think one of the other things the city did a great job and other host cities can take into account is the amount of detail in terms of the safety of the delegates and the city during the time period. There was major concerns that there was going to be massive protests, potential instigators coming in from outside groups. The city was well prepared for it and coordinated a lot of different organizations and different units to be able to combat that. So I think other cities can learn from that, because there was major concerns that we were going to have another 1968 on our hands, and then that would completely destroy, again, the reputation that the city was trying to build. So from an economic standpoint, from a business standpoint, being able to have a safe, effective, well-produced event is going to be an amazing outcome for the city, and I think any other host city would love to have that after hosting an event like the convention. Not necessarily just the convention. This could be used for multiple different types.
Chicago and most major American cities have had a long road to recovery after the pandemic in terms of big events, conventions, and conferences coming back after the shutdowns. Do you feel that Chicago is back to pre-pandemic levels in terms of activity, or has the culture changed with more access to virtual events?
So looking back pre-pandemic, and the actual start of the pandemic and what it looks like was devastating to the hospitality industry overall. Sports industry as well. We're live, we're in person, we bring individuals to locations. So huge, devastating impact right away. We start looking at the different segments, and within it, sports came back. A lot of those are outdoors. They were able to happen very early, relatively early, 2021. Live sporting events are happening, right? Hotels start to come back. Restaurants can do takeout. There's different ways they can adjust. The events industry made it really difficult. They probably had the hardest and the highest hill to climb to get back. We're still climbing. It's not over yet. So overall, we had a longer lasting impact of the pandemic. It reached deeper into our industry, but that also gave us time to think about it. To your point of hybrid events and what does that look like and the impact on that. I think a lot of small events, a lot of individual meetings that happen, maybe 50 people, let's just say. Well, maybe companies aren't hosting in person 3 or 4 times a year board meetings. Maybe they're moving to 2 and we'll have 2 hybrids. Economically, it makes sense for them. They save money, but it also is more convenient for the board members. So there's give and take, great. But most events have realized, and most event planners have realized, the importance of in-person and what does that mean. I don't think you've seen the end of large-scale events. they're going to happen. As an example, we just came off the DNC. Chicago's running into its largest convention in 5 days from now. 100,000 individuals are coming to Chicago. Happens every other year. Huge international manufacturing convention that comes into McCormick Place. Chicago is situated extremely well because we have the largest convention center in North America. So we're able to bring in those huge, large groups, and there's only 3 locations that are able to do that and host those types of events. So those events have started coming back. We started seeing the trend continue. There are reports that they believe Chicago will be at 2019 levels for events and attendance by the end of this year, which is great because some forecasts were looking at 2028 because of the hybrid meeting. Are these going to be necessary? So Chicago's situated great. Some other cities have surpassed their 2019 numbers. Chicago's a little different. We host very large events a lot of times. We'll host 25, 50,000, the 100,000 person events. Those were the last events to come back just because individuals were scared about that many people and nervous. So that's great news, is that Chicago looks like we're going to be going on. Things like NASCAR, Lollapalooza, hosting the DNC this year have really elevated us and increased. One thing I wanted to mention is that when we look at dollars, the number of dollars that Chicago brings in from tourism, namely events, that large events that come in, but tourism in general, we're above 2019 levels in terms of spending. So the economic impact is higher. That's attributed to higher costs generally across the board. But the number of dollars that we're bringing in have exceeded. We'll get our numbers back up in terms of the number of individuals. Overall, Chicago hit over 61 million tourists in 2019. We're not on pace to reach that this year, but we're going to be over 58 million, it sounds like, for this year. We're at about 56 million last year. So we're trending in the right direction to beat those numbers and continue on growing the tourism sector overall for Chicago, which is a great boon for the entire economy for Chicago. Chicago is a hospitality town. At the heart of our business, while we have amazing Fortune 500 companies headquartered here, the heart and soul of our economy is the hospitality industry. And what does that look like? Just because the number of jobs it generates, the number of dollars that it brings in, the world-renowned restaurants, event spaces, museums that we have, the cultural institutions that we can highlight for the world really to come in is going to be really important. So while we may not be at every measure pre-2019, pre-COVID, we're definitely on the track to be beating those numbers and getting back to full on what Chicago was before the pandemic.